I'm Willow October, 38, and I built a global tech company from a third-floor walk-up with the man everyone told me to leave. For years, I bent over backwards to keep the peace with my image-obsessed mother, even while hiding the person I loved. But when she slammed the door on us and said I was a disgrace for choosing him, I walked away and built a life she never saw coming. Ever been dismissed or judged by someone you sacrificed everything for? Tell me your story in the comments, because you're not alone. Before we dive in, let me know where you're watching from. And if you've ever had to choose peace over approval, hit like and subscribe for more true stories about setting boundaries and taking your power back. Here's what happened. My name is Willow October, and for most of my early life, I played the role I was given: quiet, polished, predictable. I knew how to sit at a formal dinner table by age 8, how to make polite conversation with CEOs by 12, and how to suppress any instinct that didn't align with my mother's vision of who I was supposed to be. My mother, Sherry October, was never loud, but she didn't need to be. Her opinions could cut glass. A former investment banker turned real estate mogul, she built our lives the way she built her portfolio: calculated, precise, impossible to ignore. We lived in a restored colonial in Westchester, where the landscaping was symmetrical, the dinner parties came with monogrammed menus, and the family photos on the staircase changed every season, professionally curated like a rotating art exhibit. Everything had its place. Especially me. I went to a private all-girls school where college prep began in 5th grade and debutante balls were still very much a thing. My days were booked with tutors, extracurriculars, etiquette classes, and scheduled unstructured play time, which always struck me as a contradiction, but I learned not to ask questions. My mother said curiosity was best expressed through high SAT scores, not messy emotions. I was the textbook overachiever. Perfect grades, early admission to Dartmouth, volunteer work for causes that photographed well. But nothing was ever quite enough. If I brought home a 97, she asked what happened to the other 3 points. When I got into the National Honor Society, she reminded me that Ivy League admissions weren't impressed by minimum standards. Her compliments came dressed as warnings. Her love, when it showed up, always had conditions attached. My father, Rowan, was gentler but distant. A corporate lawyer who was rarely home for dinner and even less present when he was. He deferred to my mother in all things, including parenting. I remember once, in 9th grade, I asked him why Mom never said she was proud of me. He looked up from his briefcase and said, "Your mother doesn't believe in premature celebration." By the time I left for college, I didn't know what I wanted. I just knew what was expected. I chose economics because it made sense. Because it impressed people. Because it kept the questions at bay. But deep down, I felt like I was living someone else's life, written in someone else's handwriting. I smiled through every semester, every networking event, every summer internship. I kept my head down and my transcript clean. Then I met Marcus. It was the 2nd semester of junior year. I had just started a required urban policy course and arrived early one morning to find someone already in my usual seat, tall, quiet, focused, scribbling notes into the margins of a second-hand textbook. He looked up and smiled, apologizing for taking the good spot. I told him it was fine, but I sat next to him anyway. We ended up being assigned to the same group project. That was how it started. A few late-night work sessions in the library. Then coffee. Then longer conversations that had nothing to do with zoning regulations or tax subsidies. Marcus was unlike anyone I had grown up around. He was raised by a single mom in Brooklyn, worked part-time as a bike courier, and paid his own tuition through scholarships, side jobs, and sheer force of will. He didn't come from money or status or any of the things my mother valued. But he was brilliant, genuinely brilliant. He saw patterns where others saw problems, solutions where others saw risk. And he listened. Really listened. The first time I told him I didn't know what I wanted to do with my life, he didn't offer advice or reassurance. He just said, "That makes 2 of us," and passed me the last cookie. We started dating in secret. Not because I was ashamed, but because I already knew how it would go. My mother would take one look at him, his worn shoes, his thrift store jackets, his questions that didn't sound rhetorical, and write him off before he said a word. So I kept him separate. I told my parents I was busy when they asked about visiting. I invented study groups and campus events to avoid dinners at their favorite restaurants. When I did go home for holidays, I avoided the topic altogether. But the thing about loving someone is that eventually it shows. By senior year, Marcus and I were spending nearly all our free time together. We shared everything: books, groceries, frustrations, hopes. We talked about starting something of our own one day. Something that would combine his passion for urban design with my background in economic modeling. A startup maybe. Community-focused infrastructure. Something practical but ambitious. Something ours. It felt real and terrifying. And the first thing in my life that wasn't pre-approved. I told my mom about him just before graduation. She asked me to lunch in the city to celebrate my job offer, an analyst position at a boutique firm she had personally recommended me for. We were sitting at a white linen table in Midtown, the kind of place where the menu has no prices and the waitstaff speaks in whispers. I told her I was dating someone. I used Marcus's full name. She set her wine glass down with care, like I had just said something dangerous. "What does he do?" she asked. "He's in urban development." "For who?" "He's starting something." She nodded once, then looked past me, already bored. "Just make sure you're not doing charity work with your love life," she said, barely loud enough for the waiter to hear. "Men without ambition will drain yours. You need someone who builds you up, not someone you have to carry." I didn't answer. There was nothing to say. After that, things got colder. She stopped asking questions about my plans. Started sending me listings for studio apartments in Upper East Side buildings where interns from her firm lived. She called Marcus the artist once, even though he wasn't. She thought it was funny. Still, I kept trying to make it work. I split holidays, Thanksgiving with my parents, Christmas Eve with Marcus. I skipped birthdays, pretended to be sick during family dinners, paid for nicer restaurants just so she wouldn't sneer at the venues. I even once gave Marcus a gift card to upgrade his dress shoes, framing it as a random treat, even though we both knew I just didn't want my mother to see the soles. Every time I tried to bring them closer, it backfired. When I invited Marcus to a fundraiser she hosted, she introduced him as a friend from campus. When I asked her to maybe try having dinner with us one night, just the three of us, she said she was busy. She never rescheduled. To her, my relationship wasn't just inconvenient, it was a rejection. Of the life she built. Of everything she'd tried to mold me into. I wasn't following the plan anymore. And that, to her, was unforgivable. I used to think my mother just wanted what was best for me. Now I think she wanted what made her look best. There's a difference. Loving Marcus didn't ruin my life. It revealed it. It showed me where my loyalty had been spent and how little it had been returned. It showed me the line between love and control. And it forced me to stop being the version of myself that fit her table settings and start becoming someone I actually recognized. That was the beginning. Not of the fight, but of the leaving. The shift didn't happen overnight. My mother never yelled, never said the words outright. But she didn't have to. The first comment came 3 weeks after graduation. I had invited Marcus to my father's birthday dinner, a casual thing, nothing extravagant. Just family and a few close friends at my parents' place in Westchester. Marcus showed up on time, brought a bottle of wine he'd picked out himself, and wore a navy blazer that I had helped him choose. He looked good, confident. But I saw her eyes the moment he walked in, scanning, calculating, unimpressed. "Next time, let's go for something a little more structured," she murmured to me in the kitchen, as if we were discussing centerpieces, not people. "That jacket doesn't do much for his shoulders." It was said with a smile. Always a smile. But I felt the warning in it. Over the next few weeks, the critiques became more pointed. "He seems nice," she said after brunch one Sunday. "But don't you think it's time he found something more stable? A man should have a 5-year plan at his age." I reminded her that Marcus was working full-time for a nonprofit and finishing a certification program in urban data systems. "That's great," she said, before launching into a story about someone else's son who had just made partner at a firm in Manhattan. There was always a comparison. Always someone more suitable. She never said Marcus's name again unless it was to ask, "Are you still seeing that boy?" The exclusions came gradually. First it was a gallery opening. "It's all corporate donors," she said. Not really his crowd. Then it was the 4th of July weekend at the lake house. "You know how your uncle can be," she said with a dismissive wave. "Let's avoid drama." She'd invite me but not him, then act surprised when I declined. "You're choosing him over your family now," she said once, sharp enough that I flinched. But I didn't argue. I was still trying to keep the peace. Still hoping she'd soften if I waited long enough. She didn't. Instead, she weaponized her silence. When I brought Marcus up in conversation, she'd change the subject. When I asked if he could join us for a holiday dinner, she'd pretend not to hear. And when I pushed, really pushed, she turned cold. "Willow," she said, setting down her wine glass with a controlled precision that made my stomach drop, "you need to choose wisely. One decision can reroute an entire life. Don't let pity cloud your judgment." I laughed, short, sharp, not because it was funny, but because I didn't know what else to do. "Pity?" I asked. "You think I'm with him out of pity?" She leaned back in her chair, folding her arms. "I think you've always had a soft spot for broken things. Projects. People. It's not the worst trait in the world. But it's not a good foundation for a life partner." That was the moment I understood. She didn't see Marcus as a person. She saw him as a problem. Something that needed to be solved or, better yet, removed. Around this time, her friends started chiming in. Casual comments dropped like breadcrumbs. At a cocktail event in the city, one of them pulled me aside. "We've been worried about you," she said, touching my arm with faux concern. "Sherry says you're drifting. That you're wasting your potential. We all thought you'd be heading to Bain or McKinsey by now. But instead you're freelancing." Her voice dipped on that last word, as if it were contagious. I smiled tightly. "I'm consulting on community development projects. It's long hours and low pay, but I believe in it." She nodded slowly. "That's admirable, dear. But you've always been so smart. Don't sell yourself short." Afterward, I found my mother near the bar and asked her not to talk about my personal life with her friends. "They care about you," she said, brushing it off. "They're concerned. Everyone is. We all just want to see you thrive." But thriving, in her eyes, meant upward mobility. Titles, prestige, polished LinkedIn bios. Not impact. Not relationships. Not love. The narrative began to shift. Subtly at first. She told my aunt I was going through a phase. She told her bridge group that Marcus wasn't ambitious, that he was holding me back. She told my father, who mostly stayed silent, that she was afraid I was being manipulated. That Marcus had gotten in my head. That I was losing myself. At first, I tried to correct it. "No, Mom," I'd say. "I'm choosing this. I want this. Marcus hasn't changed me, he's helped me figure out who I actually am." She'd nod slowly, as if I were admitting to a dangerous ideology. "You're not thinking clearly," she'd say. "You've always been too empathetic. You let people blur your vision." Eventually, I stopped defending us. Not because I agreed, but because the act of explaining, of justifying, felt like begging. And I had spent too many years performing for her approval to start auditioning again. It wasn't just that she didn't like Marcus. It was that she refused to see me without him. The moment I stepped outside her version of who I should be, I stopped being her daughter. I became a liability. A story she had to rewrite. She started calling less. She stopped asking about my work. She sent me job postings I hadn't requested, told me about friends' daughters who had finally come to their senses and married well. And when I didn't bite, she played the victim. "You've changed," she said once. "You don't let me in anymore." As if she hadn't been the one closing the door. There was one night, late fall, when I asked her to come to a panel Marcus was speaking on, a city council event about zoning reform and equitable housing. It was a big deal. He'd been working for months on the proposal. The room was full of community leaders, organizers, young professionals who believed in change. My mother showed up 20 minutes late, wearing heels that echoed off the tile floor like a protest. She stood in the back for 5 minutes, scrolled through her phone, then left before Marcus even finished speaking. When I asked her why she bothered coming at all, she shrugged. I wanted to see what had you so invested, she said. I saw enough. That night, I cried in the bathroom. Not because I was ashamed, but because I finally understood there was no version of Marcus she would ever accept. No version of me with him that she could tolerate. It wasn't about status. It wasn't even about him. It was about power. About control. About the story she thought she was entitled to. And I had rewritten it. By the time Marcus and I started seriously discussing moving in together, I knew what was coming. I wasn't her daughter anymore. I was the girl who got swept up. Who threw away a future for love. Who broke the rules. Who embarrassed her. She didn't say goodbye. She didn't even call. She just sent me a single text. When you're ready to come home, we'll talk. As if I had left home. As if I hadn't just found it. It had been 2 years since Marcus and I moved in together when the dinner invitation came. A formal family gathering to celebrate my father's retirement from the law firm. Just family, the email said, as if that word still meant something unbroken. I wasn't mentioned directly in the body, but my name was on the CC list with everyone else. No +1. No mention of Marcus. No surprise. I almost deleted it. I hovered over the trash icon for a solid minute before closing the laptop and walking away. But something kept pulling me back. Maybe it was nostalgia. Maybe ego. Maybe a quiet, naive part of me still hoping she'd changed. I told Marcus about it that night over dinner. You don't have to, he said simply. Not for them. Not for me. I know, I said, pushing rice around my plate. But I think I want to. We talked it through. We decided together. I would bring him. No formal announcement, no big confrontation. Just presence. Just truth. I didn't tell my mother he was coming. I knew what she'd say. I figured she'd either tolerate it or cause a scene. But I wasn't ready for how quickly she made her choice. The dinner was held at their home in Westchester, same place I grew up, same granite countertops and oversized dining room that once hosted cotillion after parties and Christmas Eve banquets. Everything looked untouched, as if time had politely stepped aside for the sake of appearances. We arrived 5 minutes early, dressed the way I knew she expected. Marcus wore a charcoal suit I had surprised him with for his birthday, tailored, clean lines, classic cut. He looked like someone you'd trust with a city budget or your life. I wore a navy dress and a coat she had once complimented years ago. I'm not sure why I reached for it that night. Maybe part of me still thought I could bridge the gap. I rang the bell. My father answered. His smile faltered for half a second when he saw Marcus, then returned. Good to see you, he said vaguely, stepping aside. Come in. The dining room was already buzzing. My cousins, my aunt and uncle, a few of my father's old partners and their spouses. Everyone seated, wine poured, place cards carefully arranged. I noticed right away. No seat for Marcus. Just one. For me. Between my cousin's husband and my father's secretary. I stood there for a moment, holding my coat over my arm like a shield. We'll pull up another chair, I said, already scanning the kitchen for spares. But my mother's voice cut through from across the room. That won't be necessary. The room quieted instantly. Conversations stilled mid-sentence. Forks paused midair. I turned to face her. She was standing near the fireplace, one hand resting on the mantel, the other holding a wine glass that hadn't been sipped. Her expression wasn't angry. It was worse. Dismissive. Cold. Controlled. He wasn't invited, she said calmly. This is a family event. I felt Marcus shift beside me. Not back. Not forward. Just still. Waiting. Letting me lead. We're family, I said quietly. She tilted her head. No. You're family. Before you decided to throw it away for some man who delivers speeches about zoning ordinances and wears borrowed suits. It's not borrowed, I said, sharper than I intended. She laughed. That's what you're defending? The suit? I looked around. No one moved. My father stared down at his wine. My aunt looked uncomfortable. My uncle suddenly found his phone fascinating. Why are you doing this? I asked. We came here in good faith. To celebrate Dad. To show up, like you said we never do. My mother set her glass down. You want honesty, Willow? Fine. He's a nobody. You are wasting your life on a man who can't give you a fraction of the future you were raised for. You're a disgrace to this family and everything we built." The silence was absolute. No one said a word. I felt heat rise up my neck, not from shame, but from the clarity of it all. She wasn't losing her temper. She was enforcing a boundary. Her version of love had rules, and I had broken them. Marcus didn't say anything. He didn't need to. His hand grazed mine gently, steady. I looked back at my father. He still wouldn't look up. "Okay," I said finally, my voice steady. "We'll leave." My mother didn't try to stop us. No apology. No protest. Just the clink of silverware resuming behind us, as if the interruption had passed. As we stepped back out into the night, the air felt cleaner than it had inside. Colder, yes, but cleaner. Neither of us spoke on the drive back. The silence wasn't uncomfortable. It was sobering, clarifying. I waited for the pain to come. For the grief. For the guilt. But it didn't. Not in the way I expected. It wasn't loss. It was release. I had spent most of my life trying to earn a seat at her table. But the truth was, it was never my table. The moment I stopped asking for a place, I realized how little I needed it. The next day, she didn't call. My father didn't text. No one reached out. Not to check in. Not to smooth things over. Not even to feign surprise. I thought about calling. Thought about trying to explain. To reason. To fix. But then I remembered the look in her eyes, the way she dismissed Marcus, not like a threat, but like an inconvenience. Like garbage on her curated lawn. And for the first time, I didn't chase her approval. Not because I didn't want a mother, but because I finally understood what kind of daughter she had wanted. One who obeyed. One who performed. One who never asked to be seen for who she really was. That wasn't me. Not anymore. Maybe not ever. Marcus never brought it up again. He didn't need to. We both knew what happened in that room. And we both knew it changed everything. After that night, the silence from my family wasn't a wound. It was confirmation. I wasn't welcome anymore. And somehow, for the first time, that felt like peace. We signed the lease on a third-floor walk-up in Queens 1 month after the dinner. It wasn't a bold declaration or some grand rebellion. It was a quiet decision made over takeout containers and an expired bottle of Pinot Noir. We were both tired. Tired of waiting for conditions to improve. Tired of working around everyone else's expectations. Mostly, I was tired of pretending I still had something to lose. The apartment had a lopsided floor in the kitchen and a bathroom sink that wobbled when you leaned too hard on it. The walls were off-white, with the kind of yellowing corners that don't show up in photos, but make themselves known in daylight. Still, it felt like a beginning. Ours. We didn't make announcements. No big posts, no email blasts to extended family. Just a change of address and a joint Spotify playlist for unpacking. My mother didn't ask where I had gone. My father forwarded me a piece of mail from the bank with no note. I wasn't disowned. I was erased. At first, I thought that silence would break me. But the longer it stretched, the more it became something else. A buffer. A kind of space I hadn't realized I needed. The days were long and unglamorous. I kept my consulting contract with the urban planning firm, freelance, project-based, decent when the invoices cleared. Marcus was working for a nonprofit focused on equitable transit and picking up late-night delivery shifts to keep us afloat. We worked opposite hours. I'd be waking up as he was dragging in. But somehow, we made it work. Some nights we argued. About groceries. About dishes. About money. Always about money. There was a week in February when we couldn't afford to run the heat and had to sleep in layers, huddled under every blanket we owned. I resented him once for not wanting the kind of life that came with central air and family money, but I didn't say it. Not because I was trying to be kind, but because I knew it wasn't actually about him. It was grief displaced. I missed her. Not the woman who'd thrown us out of her dining room. The mother I used to imagine. The version I spent years constructing out of scraps of approval and secondhand praise. The one who tucked my hair behind my ear after piano recitals, who wrote notes on my lunch napkins in 4th grade, who used to trace the outline of my face with her finger when I was sick. That mother. But the truth is, I'm not sure she ever existed. I think I just needed her to. Grief is strange like that. It isn't always about what you've lost. It's about realizing you never really had it. One night, after we'd been living together for about 6 weeks, Marcus came home to find me still at the kitchen table, staring at my laptop. I hadn't touched my dinner. I'd been rewriting the same section of a grant proposal for hours, obsessing over the phrasing of a mission statement that still didn't feel right. "You're spiraling," he said gently, setting down his bag. "Take a break." I didn't move. "Willow," he said again, softer now, kneeling next to me. "This doesn't have to be perfect. It just has to be honest." I closed the laptop. Finally. And cried. Not because of the grant, but because he was right. I had spent my whole life trying to be palatable, marketable, digestible, impossible to critique. And here I was, still doing it. Still shaving off the edges of myself to fit someone else's frame. "I don't know who I am without their expectations," I whispered. Marcus didn't try to fix it. He just took my hand and held it there on the table between us. That silence, the kind that holds you instead of condemning you, meant more than any comfort words could have. We made a plan that night. Not a 5-year strategy. Not some Pinterest vision board. Just a list. 1 whiteboard, 2 markers, and a bottle of warm wine. We wrote down what we cared about. What we wanted to build. Who we wanted to serve. It wasn't about being impressive anymore. It was about being useful. We started working on the idea that had been in the background of every late-night conversation since college. A tech platform that would help underserved communities map local infrastructure needs, sidewalk gaps, bus stop accessibility, flood risk zones. Community source data. Government collaboration. Tangible impact. It wasn't flashy, but it was functional. And it felt like us. We didn't have capital. We didn't have connections. We had one old laptop, a shared bank account with $673 in it, and a couple of friends who were good with code. That would have to be enough. I took on extra consulting gigs, piecing together invoices and spreadsheets during hours I used to spend sleeping. Marcus applied for fellowships and learned grant writing by downloading free templates and watching YouTube tutorials. We pitched our idea to anyone who would listen, community centers, small business groups, even our old professors. Some told us it was interesting. Others told us it was naive. But a few said yes. And that was all we needed. I didn't hear from my mother for a year. No texts. No holiday card. Nothing. At first, I drafted emails in my head, long ones, short ones, angry ones, conciliatory ones. But I never sent them. Not because I didn't have things to say, but because every version of the message started with a lie, that I missed her, that I wanted her back, that I was willing to bend again. Eventually, I stopped writing them altogether. By then, something had shifted. I was sleeping better, smiling more. I started taking walks again, long ones, headphones in, playlists full of songs I'd never shared with anyone. I stopped checking my inbox for her name. I stopped measuring my value by her silence. I still had moments. Sometimes, when Marcus and I would hit a wall, financial, logistical, emotional, I'd think about what it would be like to have a mother who picked up the phone, who offered help without conditions, who asked how we were doing because she actually wanted to know. That ache didn't go away completely, but it dulled over time. What hurt more than her absence was realizing how much I had centered my life around her approval. How many decisions I made to avoid conflict, how many opportunities one passed on just to maintain peace that wasn't even real. So I let go. Not all at once, but piece by piece. The need to explain myself. The instinct to edit. The habit of apologizing for being inconvenient. It's strange what happens when you stop shrinking. The people who once seemed larger than life start looking smaller. And the version of yourself you were afraid to step into? She starts to feel familiar. Even free. The day we filed our LLC paperwork, it didn't feel like a milestone. There was no champagne. No social media post. No moment of cinematic triumph. Just a quiet click of the submit button on an old laptop in our living room, followed by a deep exhale and a 20-minute discussion about whether we could still afford groceries that week. We named it Groundwork. A simple name, chosen deliberately. It wasn't sleek or aspirational. It didn't sound like a hedge fund or a venture-backed app. It sounded like what it was: basic, necessary, and focused on what people actually needed: better sidewalks, safer intersections, clean water, public transit that didn't stop running at 8 p.m. The concept was simple. We built a digital platform where residents could map infrastructure issues in their neighborhoods: flood zones, broken streetlights, unsafe walkways, then pair that data with existing city budgets, zoning plans, and proposed legislation. The goal was transparency, not revolution. We weren't trying to burn anything down. We were trying to make things visible. We expected skepticism. And we got it. Our first pitch meeting was with a local housing co-op in Brooklyn. We had no brand, no portfolio, and no funding. Just a slide deck and a demo Marcus had coded in 2 weeks while working night shifts and surviving on cold coffee and bagels. They didn't say yes, but they didn't say no either. They asked us to come back in a month after we fixed a few bugs, added a Spanish language option, and figured out how to anonymize user data. We did all of that. And more. That became the pattern. Small wins, followed by bigger challenges. We applied for a startup incubator run out of a community foundation in Harlem. We didn't get in. But one of the application reviewers emailed us later, offering mentorship and desk space in their office on weekends. That space became our headquarters. We launched in 3 zip codes first, small pilot programs supported by neighborhood associations, and a few scrappy city council aides who took a liking to our mission. The rollout was rocky. Some residents didn't trust us. Some didn't have internet access. Others thought we were just another nonprofit doing PR for a politician. We listened. We learned. We rebuilt. Marcus took point on outreach, holding town halls in libraries, sitting on stoops with residents after work, running live demos on cracked projector screens in church basements. I handled the back end: data architecture, budget breakdowns, grant writing, city filings. We weren't glamorous, but we were consistent. Meanwhile, word filtered back to me through extended relatives, cousins, family friends, old classmates I hadn't spoken to in years. My mother was talking. "She's throwing away her future," they'd say. Such a shame, all that potential wasted. One message came from a second cousin I barely knew. "Your mom's worried about you," she said gently, as if I were the one who had disappeared. "She says you're making impulsive choices. She says you're being taken advantage of." Taken advantage of. The phrase made me laugh. Because what did my mother think Marcus had taken? A Manhattan penthouse? A trust fund? The last name October? There was nothing left for him to take. She'd made sure of that. What we had now wasn't borrowed. It was built. I stopped responding to the messages. And when my mother left a voicemail, her first in over a year, I didn't listen to it. I blocked her number. Not out of anger, but out of self-preservation. I had lived long enough inside the cycle of guilt and approval. I wasn't stepping back into it. She wanted me to feel embarrassed, to doubt myself, to carry the shame of deviation. But all I felt was clarity. Cutting her off didn't feel like revenge. It felt like breathing. I knew she thought I was being dramatic, that this would blow over, that I'd call eventually, once the startup failed and the money ran out and I needed to come home. But home wasn't a place anymore. It was a partnership, a purpose, a structure we were building brick by brick, grant by grant, zip code by zip code. By year 2, we'd expanded to 5 neighborhoods. Then 10. A local journalist wrote a profile on us, calling our platform the Ways of Infrastructure. A stretch, maybe, but it brought in a flood of interest. Suddenly, we were fielding calls from city planners in Detroit, organizers in Atlanta, grant officers in Sacramento. With that came pressure. Scaling meant hiring. Hiring meant payroll. Payroll meant funding. We debated taking VC money but decided against it. Our model didn't promise unicorn returns or viral growth. It promised accountability. That wasn't something you could pitch to a boardroom of investors looking for a 10x exit. So we kept doing it the hard way. Municipal partnerships. University collaborations. Philanthropic backing. Slow money, but stable. I knew we were doing something real when an 84-year-old resident in East New York used our tool to file a zoning appeal that blocked a luxury development from displacing 3 blocks of rent-stabilized housing. She sent us a handwritten note afterward. "Thank you for giving me something to fight with." That letter meant more than any headline ever could. Meanwhile, the silence from my mother turned to static. She couldn't ignore us forever. A cousin forwarded me a photo from a holiday party, my mother standing in front of a fireplace, glass of wine in hand, smiling stiffly as someone mentioned our latest partnership with the New York Department of Transportation. "She says she's happy for you," my cousin added, voice tight with disbelief. "But it sounds more like containment." I nodded. That sounded right. She wasn't happy for me. She was embarrassed by how wrong she'd been. And still, she wouldn't say it. No apology. No invitation. No letter. Just whispers. Just distance. But the difference now was, none of it mattered. Her silence didn't sting. Her disapproval didn't sway. The image she once guarded so ruthlessly was now irrelevant to the life I was living. Because we were still here. Still building. Still moving forward without her. And that, more than anything else, was what I finally understood. You don't need a seat at their table when you're busy building your own. There were months when I genuinely believed we weren't going to make it. Not just the company, us. The stress was relentless. The money was tight. And the vision that once felt so energizing started to feel heavy. Year 3 was the first time we missed payroll. Just 2 employees, both part-time, but it felt like failure. I remember calling Marcus from the hallway outside our apartment because I couldn't bring myself to say the words while looking at him. "We don't have it," I said. "I don't know what we're going to do." He didn't say anything right away. Then he exhaled. "Okay," he said. "Let's figure it out." We dipped into our savings. Again. Cut our own salaries to 0. We borrowed folding chairs from the library and moved the team meetings to our living room. I cooked pasta for everyone once a week just to keep morale up. It wasn't glamorous, but it kept us going. And the thing was, people believed in it. In us. Not everyone. But enough. A public health department in Philadelphia used our tool to run an accessibility audit. A housing collective in Dallas licensed our software for a community land trust project. Every time someone said yes, it bought us another few months. Then came the grant rejections. The ones that stung weren't the flat-out no's. It was the "so close" responses. The "you're not what we're looking for at this time" messages. The ones that used words like interesting and emerging like they were compliments instead of deferrals. Burnout crept in slowly. It didn't look like collapse. It looked like indifference. Waking up tired. Snapping at Marcus over coffee filters. Losing track of days, then weeks. I stopped returning texts from friends. Stopped posting anything personal. I wore the same sweater for 3 days straight and didn't notice until Marcus pointed it out with a half smile and a kiss on the forehead. We fought more. Not big, screaming fights, just low, tired ones. Passive sighs, late dinners eaten in silence. I hated how it made me feel. Like everything I had given up to build this was slipping out of my hands anyway. And then, just when we thought we'd have to shut it down, we got a call. A transportation agency in Toronto wanted to pilot our platform across 5 neighborhoods. Paid. Fully funded. We didn't celebrate right away. We waited for the paperwork. Then the deposit. Then the onboarding call. Only then did Marcus open a bottle of Prosecco we'd been saving for someday. "This counts," he said. "We're still here." Toronto led to Montreal. Montreal led to Vancouver. Then came Cape Town. Then Singapore. We grew cautiously. Slowly. Carefully. We hired a real finance team. Built out legal. We launched a fellowship program to train local organizers on data literacy and urban planning. We established partnerships with universities and municipal boards. By year 10, we had international contracts. By year 11, we opened our second office. By year 12, we launched the Groundwork Foundation, focused on funding community infrastructure initiatives that didn't attract traditional capital. And somewhere in the middle of all that, we got married. We didn't do a wedding. No dresses. No guest list. No RSVP envelopes. Just the two of us, City Hall, and a dinner reservation at the same restaurant where we'd had our first official date. I wore a navy jumpsuit. He wore the same blazer my mother once called forgettable. It was the happiest day of my life. Not because it was perfect, but because it was real. There was no performance, no approval to chase, just us. And then, in year 15, came the call from Forbes. They wanted to feature us as part of a story on next-generation infrastructure entrepreneurs. Their words, not ours. The headline, "The World's Newest Billionaire Power Couple," made me laugh out loud when I first saw it. It felt absurd. Not because the numbers weren't real. They were. Between the equity stakes, the licensing deals, and the foundation's endowment, we had crossed that threshold. Quietly. But we hadn't set out to become that. We weren't trying to be powerful. We were trying to be useful. Still, we agreed to the profile. Not because we cared about the spotlight, but because we knew what it meant to be seen, what it could mean for the kids watching, for the people building, for the organizers still bootstrapping everything in borrowed church basements and public libraries. The shoot was surreal. A team of photographers, stylists, writers. They kept adjusting Marcus's posture, asking him to relax his shoulders. He leaned over and whispered, "Do I look like a billionaire yet?" I smiled. "You look like the guy who used to fix the radiator with duct tape and an old butter knife." The magazine came out 2 weeks later. Our faces side by side. The photo was clean, minimal, confident. And somewhere in a well-lit living room in Westchester, my mother saw it. I know because my cousin texted me. A screenshot. And one sentence, she cried. That should have felt like a win. Like closure. Like something. But all I felt was stillness. Not gloating. Not triumph. Just peace. Because by then, I understood something I hadn't been able to see when I was younger. All those years spent chasing her approval, trying to be enough, trying to be small, trying to fit, none of it had ever really mattered. Not to who I was becoming. Not to what we were building. And certainly not to the people we were building it for. The noise had never been about me. It was about her. Her fear. Her fragility. Her need for control. And once I let go of the need to win her over, I made space for something else. Something stronger. Quieter. Wiser. So no, I didn't feel triumphant. I felt free. It arrived on a Wednesday, folded inside a plain white envelope, addressed in handwriting I hadn't seen in years. No return address. No postmark. Just my name. Not even my full name, just Willow in the tidy, deliberate cursive I recognized immediately. Marcus found it in our mailbox and handed it to me without a word. He didn't ask who it was from. He didn't need to. The weight of it was obvious. I held it for a moment before opening it, half considering tossing it in the recycling bin. But something made me sit down instead. The letter was short. Only 3 lines. "You proved me wrong. I see that now. But I still don't understand why you chose him over your family." That was it. No greeting. No closing. No apology. Just those words, hanging on the page like they expected me to defend myself. Or maybe explain. Or maybe come back. I stared at it for a long time. There was a time when I would have written back. When I would have agonized over the right phrasing, tried to unpack everything she hadn't said, tried to build a bridge out of silence and 3 fragmented sentences. But not this time. Because the truth is, I hadn't chosen Marcus over my family. I had chosen myself. I had chosen love over fear. Honesty over performance. A future over an illusion. And that wasn't betrayal. That was survival. I set the letter down on the counter and made tea. I didn't tell Marcus what it said until 2 days later. We were folding laundry, and I handed it to him without commentary. He read it once, folded it in half, and set it back down. "She still doesn't see it," he said softly. "No," I said. "But I do. The thing about estrangement is that people think it ends with a door slamming. Some dramatic moment, a final cut. But most of the time, it doesn't look like that. It's slower. Quieter. It's space that stretches a little more each year. Until one day, the version of you they used to know no longer exists. And the version you became is one they'll never be allowed to meet." That letter wasn't an invitation to reconnect. It was a test. A check for softness. For guilt. For weakness. For any sign that I could still be pulled back into orbit. But I had outgrown it. Not just the pain. The entire premise. The idea that love meant obedience. That respect was something one-sided. That silence could be used as leverage and still be called love. That had never been family. Not really. I think what hurt the most about that letter wasn't what it said. It was what it didn't say. No, I'm sorry. No, I was wrong. No, I see who you are now and I'm proud of you. Just one more demand for justification. As if my life had been a rebellion. As if our success had only mattered in relation to her doubt. As if she couldn't understand love unless it looked like compliance. I didn't respond. Not because I was angry, but because I was done. Done trying to prove myself to someone who had only ever valued me when I mirrored her. Done trying to earn a seat at a table where I was only ever a threat to the centerpiece. Forgiveness is not the same thing as reconnection. I forgave her a long time ago. Not for her, but for me. Because carrying that weight made it harder to move forward. And I had too much to build to keep dragging her expectations behind me. But some doors stay closed for a reason. We moved again that spring. A bigger place. Still in the city, but quieter. More windows, more light. I didn't forward the letter. I didn't keep it. I shredded it one morning while I was sorting through papers for our foundation's tax filings. It felt appropriate. Paper in. Paper out. Nothing left behind. We'd begun mentoring young founders by then. People with sharp ideas and limited networks. I met with a woman who reminded me of myself at 24, bright, eager, carrying too many people's expectations on her back. After our session, she asked me, "What do you wish you'd known sooner?" I didn't have to think long. That it's okay to outgrow people, I said. Even the ones who raised you. She looked at me, like she wanted to press further. But she didn't. She just nodded. That's the part people don't tell you, that grief doesn't always come with tears. Sometimes it just shows up as clarity. We still got messages. My mother didn't have my number anymore, but people always found ways. A family friend mentioned she'd started talking about me again, this time in past tense. She was always so headstrong, she'd say. We just didn't see eye to eye. As if it had been mutual. As if we disagreed over wallpaper or politics instead of fundamental worth. I could have corrected it. Could have sent a letter of my own. Drawn a line in ink that history couldn't blur. But I didn't. Because I didn't know her that. Not anymore. What I owed, to myself, to Marcus, to everyone we were building with, was presence. Energy. Focus. A future that wasn't still orbiting a conversation that was never going to happen. There were moments, still, when I'd think about what it would have been like if she'd changed. Really changed. If she had reached out with something whole, not performative. If she had said, "I was wrong and I'm sorry." If she had asked, "Can we begin again?" But those were just daydreams. Versions of a woman I wanted to exist, not the one who raised me. And the thing is, I didn't need her to anymore. I had everything I used to think only she could give me. Belonging. Stability. Direction. We had built it ourselves. So no, I didn't write back. Some bridges don't need rebuilding. Some lives aren't meant to fold back into the ones that rejected them. And some lessons are so hard-won, you hold them like currency. I'd finally learned the difference between love and loyalty. Between forgiveness and access. Between peace and performance. And I wasn't giving any of it back. Now, most days start quietly. Coffee on the terrace. A walk around the block before emails. Marcus reading the news, me reviewing decks or applications. We don't rush like we used to. Not because we don't have things to do, but because we're not afraid of time running out anymore. We're not building out of desperation. We're building from stability. Our foundation runs a mentorship program now, one we started out of pocket, with just 5 months and a borrowed co-working space. It's grown into something real. We take on early-stage founders from overlooked communities, most of whom have never set foot in a boardroom. The kind of people who get talked over in grant meetings. Who show up to pitches without suits because they spent the last of their budget on licensing fees or Wi-Fi. We don't teach them how to assimilate. We teach them how to translate, how to speak their own language in a room that wasn't built for them. We connect them with advisors who don't make them feel like charity. We show them how to read a contract, how to negotiate ownership, how to keep their cap tables clean. We tell them the things no one told us. Because there were moments, years really, when we didn't know if we were going to survive this work, let alone succeed, let alone help others succeed. And now, here we are. We also fund scholarships for high school students, kids like Marcus used to be. First generation, public school, high GPA, and nowhere to go. We cover tuition, yes. But we also cover housing, food, transit passes, laptop repairs. The things that no one wants to admit can derail a future just as fast as a missed test score. It's not about saving anyone. It's about clearing a path that should have never been blocked in the first place. We visit campuses when we can, talk to students, listen more than we speak. And every so often, someone will pull out a copy of that old Forbes article, the one with our photo on the cover, and ask us what it felt like. And every time I say the same thing. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt free. Because that's what it really was. Not vindication. Not revenge. Freedom. The kind that doesn't require anyone else's permission. Sometimes I think about my mother, not often, but sometimes. I wonder what she tells people now. If she's revised the story to make it cleaner, more palatable. Maybe she says we had a falling out, but we're doing better now. Maybe she doesn't mention me at all. I don't know. I don't ask. There's a kind of peace in not needing to know. For a long time, I thought closure came from confrontation. From the final conversation where someone admits they were wrong. But that moment never came. And now I'm not sure it needs to. I got closure when I stopped waiting for her to see me. When I stopped trying to be chosen. When I realized I'd already chosen myself. That was the legacy I wanted. Not just for me, but for anyone watching. Because there are a lot of us out here. People who were cast out for refusing to shrink. For loving the wrong person, choosing the wrong path, saying the thing you weren't supposed to say at the dinner table. People who got tired of performing, of being palatable, of holding their breath just to keep the peace. And I want them to know there's life on the other side of that door. A big one. A full one. One you get to design. Not out of spite, but out of truth. Marcus and I talk about legacy sometimes. Not in the abstract, but in the day-to-day. What are we building? Who will carry it forward? What are we willing to let go of, and what are we never compromising again? And the answer always comes back to this: clarity. We are clear about who we are, what we value, what we're willing to fight for. And that clarity is what gave us everything. A company, a foundation, a partnership, a life. A life that wasn't built on anyone else's blueprint. I still keep a photo of our first apartment on my desk, crooked floor, chipped tile, the original whiteboard from our first pitch deck hanging above the radiator. It reminds me that we didn't arrive here because someone finally let us in. We got here because we stopped waiting. Because we built it from the ground up. And every time I pass that photo on my way out the door, I feel it again. Not anger. Not pride. Just breath. Just space. Just freedom. Because sometimes the most powerful revenge is realizing you no longer need one. If you've ever had to walk away from someone you thought would be in your life forever, how did you know it was time? And what did choosing yourself look like after that? Drop your story in the comments. I read every single one. And if this hit close to home, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more real stories about self-worth, boundaries, and becoming who you were always meant to be.